Hi everybody, so today I'm going to be reading through the poem The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. It's our third poem by him. So firstly I'll read through the poem as always and I will start to talk through an interpretation of it then. The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveller, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. Okay, so I suppose there are two ways to interpret this poem. One is the literal interpretation, and one is the figurative or metaphorical interpretation. The literal interpretation is that there is the speaker of the poem, and he is standing in a yellow wood, and he is standing between two roads which are diverged in a wood, and he's deciding which one to choose, just like in the picture here. So it's kind of like being at a fork in a road, trying to decide which one to take. Regrettably, you can't take both. You are only one person. That's human nature. You have to make a decision, and just trying to make a decision of which path to take. Now that brings me on to our figurative interpretation. The figurative or metaphorical interpretation really is how you would choose one path of life over another. The idea that in life we have to make decisions, and that is really what the key theme is in this poem. The decision-making process and the consequences of that decision. The poem is deeply concerned with nature. It is a natural picture which he draws us in with, and he uses the natural world to relate it to a decision-making process, which is part of the human condition, and the consequences which come with that decision-making process. He definitely wishes he could travel both. Regrettably, he's sorry about that here. There is a kind of casual sense of communication here. He does take a lot of time in stanza 1 to really think about which road to take. He's reluctant to make a decision quickly, so he's taking the time to think. So perhaps that shows his maturity, and perhaps maybe he's even talking with a little bit of regret. The tone of this poem is quite a nostalgic poem. He's thinking back on something which happened in his life. That idea of being at a fork in the road, and also a fork in your life, that you have to, being at a crossroads in your life, you have to make a decision, and your life could change as a result of it. I think he definitely realizes that the roads both have their benefits. The roads are just as fair as each other. Really there's not much difference in the roads. But he thinks that by travelling one road and not by travelling the other, that there could be a difference in his life. Now, as I'm saying this and I'm talking about the road, you have to really think about this in terms of the figurative interpretation as well, that I'm not always physically talking about the road, even though I am, if that makes sense. You have to interpret it in both ways, the literal and the metaphorical or figurative, as I'm talking through this. So I think the narrative of the poem overall is definitely quite simple. The language I've written up here, it's simple, direct language, definitely. Just in terms of the title briefly, it's The Road Not Taken. So we have to bear that in mind as well. There is an emphasis on the road that he didn't take. So, is he speaking with regret? It's not the road taken, it's the road not taken. So we have to bear that in mind as well. So certainly he sees the decision-making process as an important one, perhaps a life-changing process, and something that we as humans should really think about. In stanza 2 here, he's really referring to how the roads are just as fair, so they are, very much the same on many levels, but he shows his adventurous or you know, willingness side to try something new in his personality, I think, by he wants to travel the road less traveled by. So he having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. So this road, you know, is well traveled by. Or sorry, not well traveled by. It wanted where it was grassy, you know, not well traveled by. So he decides to take this road because maybe it was more interesting to him, um, and you know, gives us an impression again that he is kind of an adventurous character. However, it says here had warned them really about the same. That kind of contradicts what he is saying. You know, he's making observations that one road is more well travelled than another, yet they are, you know, both really about the same, had warned them really about the same. So he's kind of contradicting himself a little bit here. As he does choose one road over the other, I think he's reflecting on, you know, oh, I kept the first for another day. He kept the other road for another day. But really, I think the use of the exclamation mark there tells us that actually he knows that he probably won't get back to that, and that idea that once you do make a decision in life, you can't go back a lot of the time, and that's you know, that is real life. I think he continues in this stanza to point out the similarity of two roads. You know, they equally lay. So the idea that he could be trying to portray is that by choosing the less conventional road in life, or by doing something that not everybody doing, taking the road less travelled by, that you may end up having more adventures, or that your life would be a lot different if you choose the road that other people decide not to choose. I definitely think there's a sense of confusion in this stanza. The poet he's definitely still kind of trying to decide what to do. And I think what he's saying here as well, he's saying that no matter what, really, you know, you can't change what you have done. So there is that sense of regret. So even though, you know, it's a little bit of a contradiction, because even though he's saying that the decision making process is very important, certainly, and that there are consequences of the decision that you make, that actually he's saying, you know, really, would life be that different anyway? You know, he's playing with that idea in his head, because time does go on. You cannot return to the past, and you know, as way leads on to way, you know, he's aware of that. So he's quite I think mature in that sense. He realizes he's unlikely to ever go back and be in that situation of being at a crossroads in his life again. In the last stanza then, I think he realizes that with hindsight, he knows that he will think back on this time again in the future. And he kind of anticipates this with a sigh. The reader, I suppose, is left to consider, is this a sigh of regret? Is this a sigh of acceptance? So that's an idea for you to tie with in your head, how you interpret the poem. So I guess, you know, how has one decision over another, or one choice over another, resulted in different things happening in his life? So, you know, the poem in general, it's a nice narrative. I think it's getting us to think about decisions, and in life you have to make your own decisions, and only you can really travel your own road. However, he does definitely hint at a contradiction, because, you know, if both roads are essentially the same, but well, then doesn't matter which road you travel. You know, we have to think about it like that as well. I think there's a suggestion, I think, from Frost. He's hinting that perhaps, you know, the individual decision making process is not as important as he once thought, and that our lives are largely governed by faith, or there is kind of a higher God. You know, we know that Frost did have a lot of tragedy in his life, and you know, I think as a result of that, he definitely, you know, thinks about you know, life changing events that has happened to him, and that have happened to him, and how life, can be funny sometimes, and things happen to you, and sometimes you don't have power over those things. So overall, definitely, um, the sense in this poem, it's kind of like someone almost thinking aloud. It's like somebody very internally in his own thoughts. Um, so I hope that helped you to interpret the poem. Just back to the final two lines there, he took the road less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. Again, we don't know if that's a good difference or a bad difference. That's just something that you have to think about. Um, as I mentioned, the language is simple and direct, so it's not too difficult there to really understand any word in that in particular. There is kind of a musical quality to the poem. There's some sibilance throughout. I shall be telling this with a sigh. So there is that appeal to the poem as well. Again, a very famous poem. You probably have come across it before, but let me know if you have any questions about the poem.